I've been a nurse at St. Luke's Hospital for 42 years. I've held the hands of dying patients, delivered bad news to families, and watched people fight battles they were never going to win. I'm professional. I'm compassionate. I don't break down in hallways or let my personal life interfere with my work. But 3 months ago, everything I thought I'd buried came flooding back. I was charting medication on the 4th floor when a young nurse walked past me, laughing with a coworker. She was beautiful, soft brown skin, natural curls pulled into a neat bun, bright eyes that hadn't yet been dulled by the weight of this job. And then I saw her wrist. A small bird, wings stretched upward, rising from an open cage. My legs went weak. That tattoo belonged to my daughter. I drew it myself 30 years ago, the night they took her from me. So I did something I've never done in 4 decades of nursing. I followed a colleague into the supply room and asked a question I had no right to ask. "My daughter has the same tattoo as you," I whispered. "She was taken from me 30 years ago." The young nurse froze. Then her eyes turned cold, defensive, almost hostile. "Ma'am," she said sharply, "it's just a tattoo. You need to leave me alone." And she walked out. Before we dive in, have you ever seen something that brought your past crashing into your present? A face, a name, a mark on someone's skin that shouldn't exist? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love stories about lost children, second chances, and how truth can stay buried for decades but never really dies, please subscribe so you don't miss our next one. Now, let me tell you about the tattoo that shouldn't exist, the daughter I've been searching for since she was 3 days old, and the young nurse who knew more than she was telling. I'll start with the most painful part. 30 years ago, I lost my daughter in a custody battle I had no chance of winning. My shift started the way it always did. I clocked in at 6:45 in the morning, 15 minutes early like I'd done for 42 years. My hands weren't as steady as they used to be. The veins showed through thin skin now, age spots dotting my knuckles. But they still knew how to check vitals, administer medication, comfort the sick. I walked slowly through the hallways of St. Luke's, my white sneakers squeaking softly against the linoleum. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and cafeteria coffee. Familiar. Safe. This place had been my refuge for decades, the only constant in a life that had been shattered before it really began. I studied faces as I walked, every young woman, every patient, every visitor. It was a habit I couldn't break. 30 years of searching for a face I'd only seen for 3 days. 30 years of imagining her walking through these halls. Emma, my baby girl. The child they stole from me. The 4th floor was quiet that morning. Most patients were still asleep. I picked up the medication cart and began my rounds, moving from room to room with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this thousands of times before. Then I heard laughter. Bright. Genuine. The kind of laughter that makes you smile even when you don't know the joke. 2 nurses stood near the supply room, talking in low voices between chuckles. One was older, someone I recognized from the evening shift. The other was younger, someone I'd never seen before. She must have been new, fresh out of nursing school probably. She had that energy, that optimism that hadn't been worn down yet by double shifts and death notifications. She was beautiful, radiant even. Her brown skin seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights. Her curls were pulled back into a neat bun, a few strands escaping to frame her face. She wore purple scrubs and white sneakers like mine. She gestured as she spoke, her hands expressive, confident. And then I saw it. Her left hand moved, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear, and her sleeve pulled back just slightly. A tattoo. Small. Delicate. Black ink on brown skin. A bird rising from an open cage, wings stretched upward toward freedom. The hallway tilted. I grabbed the medication cart to steady myself, my breath catching in my throat. No, it couldn't be. It wasn't possible. That tattoo. I knew that tattoo. I had drawn it with my own hands 30 years ago, sketched it on paper in a hospital room while my newborn daughter slept in my arms for the last time. The young nurse laughed again, said something to her coworker, then turned and walked toward the supply room. I followed. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. My hands trembled. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. Not here, not now. She pushed open the door to the supply room and stepped inside. I followed her in, the door closing softly behind us. She turned, surprised. "Oh, hi, do you need something?" I couldn't speak. I just stared at her wrist, at the tattoo that shouldn't exist anywhere except in my sketchbook and on the daughter I'd never stopped searching for. "Ma'am?" she said, her voice cautious now. "Are you okay?" "Your tattoo," I whispered. My voice cracked. "My daughter has the same tattoo as you." Her entire body went rigid. Her shoulders tensed, her eyes sharpened, turning from friendly to defensive in a heartbeat. "It's just a tattoo," she said, her tone clipped. "Lots of people have bird tattoos." "No." I shook my head, stepping closer. "Not like that. Not exactly like that. I drew that design 30 years ago. For my baby. Before they took her from me." Something flickered across her face. Fear? Recognition? Guilt? "I don't know what you're talking about," she said coldly. "You need to stop. This is inappropriate." "Please," I begged. "Please, if you know something, if you know her—" "I don't." Her voice was sharp now, almost angry. "It's just a tattoo. Stop making it something it isn't." She pushed past me, her shoulder brushing mine, and walked out of the supply room without looking back. I stood there alone, surrounded by shelves of gauze and syringes and sterile gloves, and felt the 30-year-old wound rip open all over again. That night I could barely think. I finished my shift on autopilot, going through the motions while my mind replayed the encounter over and over. The tattoo, her reaction, the way she'd shut me down so quickly, so defensively. She knew something. I was certain of it. When I got home, I went straight to my bedroom and dropped to my knees beside the bed. I reached underneath, my fingers finding the old cardboard box I kept there. The box I hadn't opened in years because it hurt too much. I pulled it out and sat on the floor, my back against the bed, and lifted the lid. Inside were the pieces of a life that never got to exist. Court papers with legal language I'd read so many times I had them memorized. Custody denied. Parental rights terminated. The words that had destroyed me. My old sketchbook, pages yellowed with age. I opened it carefully, my hands shaking. And there it was. The drawing I'd made 30 years ago. A bird breaking free from a cage, wings spread wide, reaching for the sky. I'd drawn it the night the judge told me I was losing Emma. I'd sat in that hospital room, holding my 3-day-old daughter, and sketched a promise I couldn't keep. I wanted her to be free. Free from the pain her father would cause. Free from the lies. Free from a childhood I couldn't protect her from. Beneath the sketchbook was Emma's hospital bracelet. Baby girl Logan. 3 days old, 6 pounds, 2 ounces. And beneath that, a small yellow sock. The only piece of clothing I'd been allowed to keep. I sat there on my bedroom floor, surrounded by ghosts, and whispered into the darkness. "They stole you from me, Emma. They stole everything. But that tattoo, that impossible tattoo on a stranger's wrist, it meant something. It had to." The next morning I arrived at the hospital an hour early. I sat in the cafeteria with a cup of coffee I didn't drink, watching the entrance, waiting. At 6:30 she walked in. The young nurse. Purple scrubs again, hair pulled back. That same confident walk. And then she saw me. Her eyes landed on my badge and I watched her read my name. Patricia Logan. Her face went pale. Her steps faltered. Her mouth opened slightly, like she was trying to breathe but couldn't. "You're her," she whispered. Oh my God. Before I could respond, before I could even stand, she crossed the cafeteria in 3 long strides, grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the hallway. "Come with me," she said urgently. "We need to talk. Now." She dragged me into an empty patient room, closed the door, and locked it behind us. She locked the door behind us and turned to face me, her back pressed against it like she was trying to keep the world out. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Her hands shook. "I'm not your daughter," she said. The words hit me like a physical blow. I grabbed the edge of the empty hospital bed to steady myself. Of course she wasn't. I'd known that the moment I saw her face. But the tattoo meant something. "Then why," I whispered, my voice breaking, "why do you have that tattoo?" She looked at her wrist, at the bird breaking free from its cage, and her eyes filled with tears. "Emma," she said softly, My wife. She has this tattoo. The room spun. My knees buckled. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, my entire body trembling. Your wife, I repeated, barely able to form the words. Emma. Emma is your wife. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks now. I got this tattoo 2 years ago. To match hers. She designed it when she was 19. She told me it meant freedom. Freedom from pain she didn't understand. Freedom from feeling unwanted. Unwanted? The word came out as a sob. No, I wanted her. I've wanted her every single day for 30 years. Mara, I could see her name badge now, wiped her face with the back of her hand. Her adoptive parents told her you abandoned her. They said you signed away your rights because you didn't want to be a mother. They showed her court documents that made you look unstable, unfit. They told her you never tried to find her. That's a lie. I was shaking so hard I could barely speak. That's a lie. Her father, my ex-husband, he had money. He had lawyers. He made me look like I was crazy. He said I was dangerous. The judge believed him. I fought for her. I fought until I had nothing left. Mara sat down in the chair across from me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Emma's been struggling her entire life, depression, anxiety. She always felt like something was wrong, like the story didn't add up. Her adoptive parents forbade her from searching for you. They said it would only hurt her, that you didn't want to be found. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers, opened my photos, and found the picture I'd taken years ago of the original sketch. I turned the screen toward her. I drew this the night they took her from me. She was 3 days old. I held her in that hospital room and I drew her a promise. I wanted her to be free, free from the pain I knew was coming. I wanted her to fly. Mara stared at the image, her hand covering her mouth. It's the same, exactly the same. She drew it without knowing, I whispered. She carried me with her without knowing. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of 30 years pressing down on both of us. Where is she? I asked finally. Please, I need to see her. Mara looked torn, her face a mixture of love and fear. I don't know if that's a good idea right now. She's fragile. She's been hurt so much already. So have I. My voice broke. I've been searching for her for 30 years. I've looked at every young woman's face, hoping it was hers. I've imagined this moment 1,000 times. Please, please don't take this away from me again. Mara closed her eyes, her jaw tight. I love her, more than anything in this world. I need to protect her. I'm not here to hurt her, I said. I'm her mother. I know. Mara opened her eyes and I saw the same pain in them that I'd been carrying for 3 decades. I see it in your eyes. The same pain Emma carries. The same loss. Then let me see her. Mara stood up slowly. I'll talk to her. That's all I can promise. I'll tell her what you said. I'll show her the sketch. But the decision is hers. If she doesn't want to meet you, you have to respect that. I will, I whispered, even though the thought of being so close and still losing her again nearly destroyed me. I will. Mara walked to the door, unlocked it, and paused. My name is Mara, by the way, Mara Chen. Patricia Logan, I said, though she already knew. I know. She offered a sad smile. Emma talks about you sometimes. In her sleep, she calls for her mama. She doesn't even realize she's doing it. And then she was gone, leaving me alone in that empty hospital room with 30 years of grief pouring out of me in silent, shaking sobs. The next 3 days were torture. I went to work, but I couldn't focus. My hands shook when I administered medication. I forgot patients' names. I stared at the door every time it opened, hoping to see Mara, hoping for news. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over. What if Emma didn't want to meet me? What if she hated me? What if 30 years was too long and the damage was irreversible? I pulled out the old cardboard box again and went through everything. The court papers that called me unstable, the psychiatric evaluation they'd forced me to take, the letters from my ex-husband's lawyers painting me as dangerous, unfit, a threat to my own child. I'd been 23 years old, barely more than a child myself. I had no money, no family, no support system. My ex-husband had everything. Money, power, connections. The judge looked at me and saw exactly what he wanted me to see. A young, poor, emotional woman who couldn't provide the life he could. But I'd loved her. God, I'd loved her with everything I had. On the third day, I was sitting in the break room during my lunch hour, staring at a sandwich I couldn't eat, when Mara appeared in the doorway. I stood up so fast my chair fell backward. "She wants to meet you," Mara said quietly. "But she's angry and scared." "So am I," I whispered. Mara nodded. "Come with me." We walked through the hospital in silence, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. We took the elevator to the third floor, walked past the nurse's station, and stopped outside a family conference room. "She's inside," Mara said. "I'll be there too. For support. For both of you." "Thank you," I managed to say. Mara opened the door. The room was small. A table, a few chairs, soft lighting, and sitting in one of those chairs, her hands clenched tightly over her chest, was my daughter, Emma. 30 years vanished in an instant. I saw her face, my baby's face, but grown now, beautiful, strong. Her brown skin glowed under the soft lights. Her natural curls were pulled back away from her face. Her eyes, God, her eyes were exactly like mine, Hazel. Filled with pain and confusion, and something that looked like hope, but was afraid to be. "You," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You're the woman in the court records. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I could only stare at her, at this miracle sitting 3 feet away from me. Yes," I finally managed. "I'm Patricia. I'm your mother." Her jaw tightened. Her hands clenched harder. "Why didn't you want me?" The question tore through me like a knife. "I did want you. I've wanted you every single day since they took you from me." "Then why didn't you fight?" Her voice rose, anger bleeding through the pain. "Why didn't you come for me?" "I did fight." I stepped closer, my legs shaking. "I fought with everything I had." "But your father had money. He had lawyers. He had power. And I had nothing. I was 23 years old with no family, no resources, nothing. The court believed his lies. They called me unstable, unfit. They took you from me when you were 3 days old, and I spent the next 30 years trying to find you." "Liar." Emma stood up, tears streaming down her face. "You signed away your rights. You abandoned me. I've seen the papers." "Those papers are lies." My voice broke. "Your father manipulated everything. He made me look like a monster so he could take you. And then he disappeared. I searched for you. I hired private investigators when I could afford them. I checked adoption registries. I looked at every face hoping it was yours. I never stopped looking." Emma's legs gave out. She sat back down hard, her breath coming in short gasps. Mara moved to her side immediately, rubbing her back, whispering something I couldn't hear. I reached into my bag with trembling hands and pulled out the old sketchbook. I opened it to the page I'd looked at 1,000 times and held it out to her. "I drew this the night they took you from me. The night the judge told me I was losing you. I wanted you to be free. I wanted you to fly away from all the pain I knew was coming. I drew this for you." Emma stared at the sketch, her eyes wide, her hands slowly reaching out to touch the page. The date was written in faded ink in the corner. 30 years ago, the week she was born. "That's..." her voice cracked. "That's my tattoo. I drew this when I was 19. I thought it came from me. I thought it was mine." "It came from both of us," I whispered. "You carried it without knowing. You carried me with you." Emma looked at the tattoo on her wrist, then back at the sketch, then at me, and then she broke. The sound that came out of her was raw, wounded, 30 years of lies and pain and longing crashing down all at once. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Mara held her, crying too, while I stood there with the sketchbook in my shaking hands, watching my daughter fall apart. Emma cried for a long time, not the quiet, controlled crying you do in public. This was the kind of crying that comes from deep inside, the kind that's been building for years and finally finds a way out. Her whole body shook with it. Mara held her, whispering soft words I couldn't make out, and I stood there feeling helpless, wanting to hold my daughter but not knowing if I had the right. Finally Emma's sobs quieted to hiccups and shaking breaths. She wiped her face with her hands, then looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "I always felt like something was wrong," she said, her voice hoarse. "The story never made sense. My adoptive parents said you didn't want me, but then why did they forbid me from searching? Why did they get so angry whenever I asked questions? Why did they hide everything from me?" I pulled out a chair and sat down across from her, my legs too weak to hold me anymore. "Because they knew the truth. They knew I didn't abandon you. They knew I was looking for you. They told me you were unstable," Emma said, "that you were dangerous, that trying to find you would only hurt me. Your father was very good at lying." The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. "He convinced the judge. He convinced the social workers. He probably convinced your adoptive parents too. He made me look like someone I wasn't so he could have complete control." Emma looked at Mara, who nodded encouragingly, then back at me. "Tell me everything. I need to know the truth. All of it." So I did. I told her about meeting her father when I was 21, how charming he was at first, how that charm turned to control, how control turned to violence, how I'd gotten pregnant and thought maybe a baby would change him, make him better, how wrong I was. I told her about the night I tried to leave, 8 months pregnant, and how he'd found me, how he'd threatened me, how he'd promised I'd never see my child if I tried to leave again. I told her about the day she was born, how I'd held her for 3 days in that hospital room, how I'd memorized every detail of her face, how I'd sketched the tattoo with trembling hands, knowing they were going to take her from me. I told her about the custody hearing, how his lawyers painted me as mentally unstable, how they used my youth, my lack of money, my fear against me, how the judge looked at me like I was nothing and gave my baby to a man who'd spent years hurting me. I told her about the years after, how I'd worked 3 jobs trying to save money for lawyers, for investigators, for any chance of finding her, how every lead went nowhere, how her father had covered his tracks so well it was like she'd disappeared from the earth. Emma listened to every word, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, tears running silently down her face. "I wrote you letters," I said, pulling a stack of envelopes from my bag. "Hundreds of them. I never knew where to send them, but I wrote them anyway. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time I saw something that reminded me of you." I handed her the letters. The envelopes were yellowed with age, addressed to Emma but with no street, no city, just the words, "To my daughter, wherever you are." Emma took them with shaking hands, staring at the dates. Some were from 30 years ago, some from last year. "I never stopped," I whispered. "I never stopped loving you. I never stopped hoping I'd find you." Emma opened the first letter, dated 1 week after she was born. Her eyes moved across the words I'd written 3 decades ago. Then she opened another. And another. With each letter, fresh tears fell. Mara moved closer, reading over Emma's shoulder, her own face wet with tears. "I'm so sorry," Emma finally said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry I believed them. I'm so sorry I thought you didn't want me." "You were a child," I said. "You believed what you were told. This isn't your fault." "But I should have known. I should have felt it." "You did feel it," Mara said softly. "You always said something was wrong. You always said the story didn't make sense. You felt it in here." She placed her hand over Emma's heart. Emma looked at her wrist, at the tattoo she'd drawn at 19 without knowing it was a message from a mother she'd never known. "I drew this when I was at my lowest point. I just found out I was adopted. I was so angry, so hurt. I felt like I'd been living a lie my whole life. And I drew this bird, breaking free from a cage. I thought it was about escaping the pain. I didn't know it was about you, about us." "It was always about us," I said. "You carried me with you all along, you just didn't know it." Emma stood up slowly and walked around the table. I stood too, my heart hammering, not knowing what she was going to do. And then she walked into my arms. The moment I felt her against me, the moment I wrapped my arms around my daughter after 30 years, something inside me that had been broken since the day they took her finally started to heal. She was taller than me now, stronger, but in that moment, she felt like the 3-day-old baby I'd held in that hospital room so long ago. She sobbed into my shoulder, her arms tight around me, and I held her like I'd wanted to hold her for 30 years. I stroked her hair, whispered words I'd been saving, promised her things I should have been able to promise decades ago. "I wanted you," I whispered, "every day of my life, every single day." That broke her completely. She collapsed into me, her weight pressing us both down until we were sitting on the floor, still holding each other, still crying. Mara knelt beside us, her hand on Emma's back, crying too. "I'm sorry," she said to me. "I'm sorry I didn't trust you sooner. I saw the pain in you that first day, and I recognized it because it's the same pain Emma carries. I should have known then." "You were protecting her," I said. "That's what love does." We sat there on the floor of that conference room for a long time, 3 women bound together by a tattoo, by 30 years of lies, by a love that had survived everything. Eventually Emma pulled back, wiping her face. "What happens now?" she asked. "Whatever you want," I said. "I'm not here to disrupt your life. I'm not here to replace anyone. I just want to know you. If you'll let me." Emma looked at Mara, who nodded. "I want to know you too," Emma said. "I want to hear everything, all the stories, all the years we missed. I want to understand where I came from." "I'll tell you everything," I promised. "And I want you to meet Mara properly," Emma said, taking her wife's hand. "Not just as the nurse who found you, but as my partner, my family." I looked at Mara, at this woman who'd loved my daughter, who'd gotten a matching tattoo to show solidarity, who'd been brave enough to tell Emma the truth even when it was hard. "Thank you," I said to her. "Thank you for loving her, for protecting her, for bringing her to me." Mara smiled through her tears. "She's the best thing that ever happened to me. I'd do anything for her." "So would I said. "I always have." The 3 of us stood up slowly, helping each other. Emma looked at her wrist, then at mine, then at Mara's. 3 women, Emma said softly. 1 tattoo, 1 story. "The cage is open now," I whispered, echoing the words I'd written in one of those old letters. Emma smiled, really smiled, for the first time since I'd walked into the room. "It's been waiting for you for 30 years, she said. We left the conference room together and walked down the hospital hallway. Emma held Mara's hand with one hand and mine with the other. We found a bench near a window overlooking the city and sat down, Emma between us, finally where she belonged. People walked past, nurses and doctors and patients, none of them knowing they were witnessing a miracle. None of them knowing that after 3 decades of separation, a mother and daughter had finally found each other. Emma leaned her head on my shoulder, and I closed my eyes, feeling her warmth, her realness, the proof that all those years of searching hadn't been for nothing. "Tell me about when I was born," Emma said quietly. "Tell me everything you remember." So I did. I told her about the hospital room, about the way she'd gripped my finger with her tiny hand, about the sound of her first cry, about the 3 days we'd had together before the world tore us apart. And for the first time in 30 years, those memories didn't hurt. They were still sad, still marked by loss, but they were also beautiful now. Because the story didn't end where I thought it did. The story continued. It found its way through 3 decades of lies and pain and separation, and it led us here, to this bench, to this moment, to this impossible reunion. Mara reached across Emma and took my hand, squeezing it gently. Emma held both of us, her head still on my shoulder, her breathing finally calm. "I have a lot of questions," Emma said after a while. "About my father, about what happened after, about why the system failed so badly." "I'll answer all of them," I promised. "Whatever you need to know. And I have things to tell you too," Emma said. "About my life, about growing up, about Mara and how we met, about everything you missed. I want to hear all of it." We sat there as the afternoon sun moved across the sky, casting long shadows through the hospital windows. We talked and cried and sometimes just sat in silence, getting used to the reality of being together. 3 women. 3 lives that should have been connected from the beginning but took 30 years to find each other. 3 matching tattoos, each one carrying a piece of the same story. A bird breaking free from a cage. Wings stretched toward the sky. Finally, after all this time, flying home. After 3 decades of silence, of searching, of carrying pain that felt too heavy to bear, the truth finally found its way home, and with it came something I thought I'd lost forever. My daughter. My Emma. My girl who'd been stolen from me but never really left me. She'd carried me with her all along, in a tattoo she didn't know was a message, in a feeling she couldn't explain, in a love that survived 30 years of lies. The cage was open now. And we were both finally free.